Mia worked as a waitress in a small family restaurant, a place with warm lights, wooden tables, and the soft smell of fresh bread floating in the air. She had been working there for almost 2 years, moving quietly from table to table. Always polite, always calm, never creating trouble. Most customers barely remembered her face, and that was exactly how she liked it. She didn't want attention, she didn't want questions, and she didn't want anyone to know about her past. It was a Friday night, the busiest night of the week. The restaurant was full, people talking loudly, waiters rushing, dishes clinking, but inside all that noise, Mia felt as if she was floating far away. She had been feeling strange all day. Like something big was waiting for her, something she could not see yet. She tried to ignore the feeling and continued serving water and taking orders. Then the front door opened and everything slowly changed. A tall man in a black suit stepped inside. He looked rich, confident, and different from the normal customers. This was Richard Hawley, a billionaire tycoon known for visiting random businesses without warning. No one expected him to walk into a small restaurant like this. The workers whispered, some became nervous. Even the manager straightened his back and wiped his hands on his apron. But Richard wasn't there for the food or the business. His sharp eyes searched the room until they landed on Mia. For a moment, she froze, not understanding why he was staring at her. She tried to look away, but he raised his hand slightly, signaling her to come to his table. With shaking hands, she walked toward him. She didn't like talking to wealthy or famous people. They always made her feel small, but she forced a smile and asked, "How may I help you, sir?" He didn't look at the menu. He didn't order anything. Instead, he looked at the old piano standing in the corner of the restaurant. It was dusty, out of tune, and no one had touched it in years. "Do you play the piano?" Richard asked suddenly. The question hit her like a shock. Her breath caught in her chest. For a moment, she couldn't even answer. Her hands tightened around the small notepad she was holding. She whispered, "I used to." Richard leaned closer. "Play something for me." Mia's knees almost gave out. The tray in her hand slipped and fell to the floor. A glass rolled across the tiles. The entire restaurant went quiet. Every customer turned to look at her. The chefs peeked out from the kitchen door. Even the music playing on the speakers suddenly felt too loud. Everyone waited for her next move. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't want to play, not here, not in front of strangers. She had not touched a piano since her mother died. Her mother had been the only person who believed in her musical talent. After she passed away, every key on the piano felt like a wound. But Richard was still watching her, his expression calm but serious. He wasn't testing her, he wasn't mocking her. He genuinely wanted to hear her play, and that confused her even more. Why would a billionaire care about a random waitress? Why her? Why now? Her legs felt heavy as she slowly walked toward the old piano. The room stayed silent. Everyone followed her with their eyes. She could feel their curiosity pressing against her back. Her hands trembled when she finally sat down on the wooden bench. The piano looked even older up close. Some keys were yellow, some were chipped. Dust covered the top like a thin blanket. She lifted her hands over the keys, but couldn't bring herself to touch them. Richard waited patiently, his eyes soft but focused. The customers grew restless, some whispering excitedly. They had no idea what she was about to reveal. And Mia herself had no idea what sound would come out if she dared to press a key. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and remembered her mother's voice telling her, "Music is your heart speaking." Her fingers touched the keys gently. And then she pressed one single note. The soft, trembling sound filled the entire room. People gasped quietly. That one note marked the moment her life began to shift into something she never expected. Something bigger than her fears, bigger than her past. And the night that started like any other suddenly became the night that changed everything for her. Mia sat frozen in front of the old piano. Her fingers trembled lightly over the keys, even though she had only touched one note. That single sound still echoed in her mind, soft but powerful. Reminding her of everything she tried to forget, the customers continued to stare, unsure if she was about to play a full song or run away again. Richard watched her carefully from his table. His calm expression didn't change, but there was something sharp in his eyes, like he was seeing through the fear she tried so hard to hide. He didn't rush her, he didn't pressure her, he simply waited. And somehow that expectation made her heart beat even faster. Inside Mia, two parts of her were fighting. One part wanted to stand up, apologize, and run to the back room where no one could see her cry. The other part, the part she hadn't listened to in years, wanted to stay, wanted to play, wanted to feel music again. That part whispered softly inside her, telling her she wasn't that scared girl anymore. She took a small breath and pressed a second key. The note was slightly cracked, but it carried emotion. Some customers leaned forward, waiting for more. Others started recording quietly on their phones. Hoping something magical might happen, Mia hated the attention. But she also felt warmth slowly spreading through her chest. Memories of her childhood floated back, of sitting beside her mother on a soft piano bench, of learning to move her fingers gently, of laughing when she made mistakes, of her mother saying she had a gift inside her that would someday shine. But after her mother died, everything changed. Her father stopped smiling, money became tight, and the piano was eventually sold to pay bills. That was the last time she touched an instrument. And standing here now brought back all of those memories, like a wave she wasn't ready for. She pulled her hands back from the keys, breathing heavily. She didn't want to break down in front of strangers. She didn't want tears to fall. Not here, not now. The room stayed silent, everyone waiting for her next move. Then Richard spoke, his voice steady and gentle. "You don't have to be perfect. Just play what feels right." His words cut through her fear. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a test. It sounded like encouragement, something she had not heard in a very long time. The restaurant manager, who normally never paid attention to her, was now watching from the side with wide eyes. He whispered to a waiter, "Is she really this good?" The waiter shrugged. "I've never even seen her touch the piano." Mia looked down at her hands. Pale and shaking slightly, she didn't know if she could play a real song. But maybe she could try a simple melody, something small but meaningful. Something her mother taught her long ago. She lifted her fingers and started to play the first few notes of that old tune. The piano was old and imperfect, but the melody came out gentle and emotional. A soft hush fell across the room as people recognized the beauty behind her nervous movements. As she played, the world around her slowly disappeared. The voices faded, the bright restaurant lights softened. The pressure in her chest loosened. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't pretending to be small. She wasn't running from her past. She was simply Mia, the girl who once loved music more than anything. Her fingers moved more smoothly than she expected, remembering each note like old friends returning home. The customers couldn't believe their ears. This wasn't the sound of a nervous waitress. This was the sound of a true musician rediscovering her heart. Richard pulled out his phone and began recording her. Not for fame, but because he knew something special was happening. This girl was playing through her pain, turning her fear into something beautiful. A young couple near the window held hands while listening. A child leaned over his table just to see her better. An elderly man wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. People who didn't even know her suddenly felt connected to her, but Mia didn't see any of them. Her eyes stayed closed, her heart guiding her hands. The longer she played, the more she felt her nervousness melting away like ice under sunlight. Then, just as she reached the soft ending of the melody, the lights flickered slightly, and a sudden burst of clapping filled the room. She snapped out of her focus, startled. Her hands flew away from the piano. Her eyes opened wide with surprise. She had forgotten she wasn't alone. The applause grew louder, echoing through the restaurant. Mia's face flushed with embarrassment. She wanted to hide again. But the sound of people cheering kept her frozen in place. Richard stood up from his table, smiling proudly. "You have a gift," he said softly. "Don't hide it again." Mia didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight, her eyes shiny with emotion. All she managed was a tiny whisper of a thank you. But deep inside her, something had awakened. Something she thought was gone forever. And she knew this was only the beginning. Something bigger was coming her way. Something she never imagined. Mia sat frozen on the piano bench. The applause still echoing around her like rolling thunder. She never expected anyone to clap for her. Not after so many years of silence for a moment. She wondered if she had dreamed everything, the notes, the melody, the faces watching her with surprise and admiration. But it wasn't a dream, it was happening right in front of her. Some customers were still recording on their phones, others whispering excitedly. The manager had a shocked smile on his face as if he couldn't believe his quiet waitress had just turned the whole restaurant into a music hall. Mia's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She didn't like attention. She didn't want everyone staring at her. But before she could run away, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw Richard walking toward her. His face calm but serious. "You played beautifully," he said softly. "But I can tell you're holding back." Mia blinked, confused. "Holding back?" "Yes," he replied, sitting on the edge of the piano bench. "That wasn't your real level. That was fear mixed with talent. But your real talent, it's deeper." Mia lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. No one had talked to her like that in years. No one had believed she still had music inside her. Before she could answer, a young woman from across the restaurant called out, "Play one more." "Please." Others joined in, clapping and cheering. "Another song." "One more." Mia's heart jumped into her throat. The pressure felt heavy again. She shook her head quickly and stood up from the bench. I can't," she whispered. "I should get back to work." But the manager stepped forward, raising a hand. "No, Mia, it's okay. Take a moment. We've never seen anything like this." Hearing that only made her more nervous. She rushed toward the back room, pushing open the swinging door and leaning against it as her breath shook. Her hands were trembling again, even though she had just played a beautiful melody. Inside the small staff room, she put her hands over her face, trying to calm down. Why was this happening? Why now? She wanted to stay invisible, to do her job silently, not become the center of attention. A soft knock came on the door. She wiped her eyes quickly and opened it a little. Richard stood outside. But he didn't push his way in. He simply spoke gently. "I'm sorry if I made things difficult for you," he said. "But when I see talent, I don't look away." Mia swallowed hard. She didn't know if she should thank him or ask him to leave her alone. "I didn't expect all of that," she murmured. "I haven't played since." She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Richard nodded slowly. "Since someone you cared about passed?" Mia's eyes widened slightly. He had guessed correctly. She didn't speak, but he continued, "Your playing had sadness in it. I could feel it." She didn't like sharing her emotions with strangers, but something about Richard felt safe. Honest, steady. "Why do you care so much?" she finally asked. "Because real talent gets lost too easily," Richard replied. "And I've seen too many people let fear bury their gifts." His words struck her deeply, like they were aimed straight at the part of her heart that still believed in music. Even if she tried to ignore it, before she could respond, there was sudden noise from the dining area chairs scraping. Customers gasping, phones vibrating, someone shouted. "The video already has 10,000 views." Mia froze. She pushed the door open slightly and peeked through the small gap. A group of customers stood near a table holding their phones up, looking shocked. "Look," a teenage girl said. "Someone already uploaded the first clip. It's going viral." Another person added, "People are asking who she is." Mia's stomach twisted. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for strangers all over the internet to see her face. Her hands, her music. Richard glanced at her reaction. "You can't stop it now," he said gently. "But you can choose what happens next." She stepped out from the back room slowly, watching the excited crowd in disbelief. Some people were refreshing their screens every few seconds, shouting things like, 20,000 views now. And this girl is incredible. Her knees felt weak. The world suddenly felt too big. Too fast, too bright. A middle-aged woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "My dear, your music reminded me of my father," she said. "Thank you," a young man stepped forward. "My sister plays too. You're amazing." Mia didn't know what to say. She had never received compliments like this from strangers. But then she saw Richard standing quietly, watching her carefully. Like he knew this moment would decide her future. She swallowed, lifting her eyes to him. She wasn't sure what she wanted yet, fame, music, or peace, but she knew one thing clearly. Her life was no longer the same. Something had shifted permanently. And there was no going back. Inside her chest, her heart whispered softly, a voice she had not heard in years. "Don't run away again." The restaurant buzzed like a hive after Mia stepped out from the back room. Everyone had something to say about her performance. Some were replaying the video, others were calling friends. Even the kitchen staff kept peeking out whenever they could. The room felt alive, full of a strange excitement that Mia had never seen in this place before. But for Mia, the noise felt heavy. It wrapped around her like warm air that she couldn't breathe through. She kept her hands pressed together to stop them from shaking. Richard stepped closer and spoke softly. "You should sit. You look overwhelmed." She nodded quickly and found a small empty booth in the corner. She slid into the seat and tried to steady her breathing. But the world around her felt like a storm she wasn't ready to handle. At another table, a group of teenagers cheered loudly. 30,000 views. One shouted, "This is insane." Another replied, "She's gonna be famous by morning." Mia covered her mouth with her hand. Famous, that word felt dangerous. She never wanted to be famous. She wanted to survive. Stay quiet, stay invisible, play music only for herself and her mother's memory. Richard sat across from her, calm and steady. "Mia, listen," he said. "I know you're scared, but some chances come only once in a lifetime." His voice was gentle, but his eyes carried something strong, a belief she wasn't used to seeing from anyone. Certainly not a rich tycoon who could easily ignore someone like her. "I didn't come here tonight looking for talent," he continued, "but when I heard you play, it felt wrong to let you stay hidden." Mia looked away, tears burning the edges of her eyes. "I'm not someone special," she whispered. "Yes, you are," he said without hesitation. "You just forgot it for a while." Before she could respond, the restaurant door burst open. A man wearing a jacket with a large camera bag stepped in. A social media reporter who rushed wherever a viral moment happened. He looked around quickly until his eyes landed on Mia. "There she is," he shouted, pointing at her. A few customers clapped as he approached. "Young lady, everyone is talking about your piano video. It's all over social media." Mia froze. Her heart raced. She wasn't ready to talk to a reporter. She wasn't ready for bright lights or big questions. Richard stepped in front of her protectively. "She needs space," he said firmly. "Back off for now." The reporter raised his hands in surrender. All right. But the world wants to know who she is." He winked at Mia and hurried back outside to make a live update. Mia felt dizzy. She leaned back in her seat and whispered, "Why is this happening so fast?" Richard answered, because people felt something real when you played. Her mind spun with fear and confusion. Part of her wanted to run away and hide somewhere no camera could reach. But another part, the part that played the piano so bravely minutes ago, felt something new rising inside her. A spark of hope that scared her even more than the attention. Just then, Mia's phone buzzed nonstop. It vibrated so much that she finally picked it up, expecting maybe calls from her boss or an unknown number. But when she unlocked it, she saw dozens of notifications. Messages from friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Even her old music teacher. One message read, "Is this really you? I knew you could never forget music." Another said, "Your mother would be so proud of you." Mia pressed a hand to her chest. Tears filled her eyes again. But this time they were a mix of pain and comfort as she scrolled. A new message popped up from an unfamiliar number. "Hello Mia, I'm from the City Music Academy. We saw your video. We would like to offer you a trial session free of cost." Her breath hitched. This was too much, too sudden, too unreal. She looked at Richard with wide eyes. They want me to come." He smiled softly. "Of course they do. But I'm just a waitress," she whispered. "No," he said firmly. "You are a pianist who forgot her place on the stage." Before she could react, a small group of customers approached her table. "Miss, your music reminded me of my wedding dance," an older woman said, wiping tears. "My daughter wants to learn piano now because of you," another man added. Mia was overwhelmed, but their sincere faces touched her heart. They weren't praising her because she was viral. They were thanking her because her music reached them. After they left, Richard leaned forward. "Mia, I don't want to push you, but you have a choice to make now." She looked at her trembling hands. The same hands that had brought the whole restaurant to silence. The same hands that carried her mother's lessons. The same hands that the world was suddenly watching. Her voice was soft but determined. "I'm scared," Richard nodded. "Good. That means it matters." She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. It felt like standing at the edge of something huge. Something terrifying, something bright. When she opened her eyes again, her expression had changed. The fear was still there. But now there was something else, courage. "I want to try," she whispered. Richard smiled. "Then your journey begins tonight." And in that moment, Mia felt something shift inside her again. Not fear, not pressure, but a quiet fire that had been waiting to awaken for years. Mia walked out of the restaurant that night with weak legs and a heart full of noise. The cool air touched her face, but her mind was burning. With everything that had happened inside, she leaned against the wall outside the restaurant, trying to steady her breath. Richard followed her out quietly. Not wanting to overwhelm her, he waited a few seconds before speaking. "You did something brave tonight." Mia shook her head. "It didn't feel brave. It felt like I was falling." Richard smiled softly. "Sometimes falling is the first step to flying." She didn't answer. Her hands were shaking again, so she folded them tightly together. She stared at the streetlights glowing in the night, wondering how her quiet life had suddenly changed in just a few hours. Her phone kept buzzing, but she ignored it. She didn't want to read more comments, more messages, more attention. She just wanted silence. But silence was no longer following her. The whole world had found her because of one song. Richard stepped beside her. "Mia, I don't want to force you, but I do want to help you." Her eyes softened. "Why?" "Because I know what it feels like to lose something important," he replied. "And I know how painful it is to believe your talent doesn't matter anymore." His words surprised her. She had never imagined a rich tycoon like him could understand her pain. "What did you lose?" she asked quietly. "Someone I loved," he said, looking away. "She believed in me before I believed in myself." His voice held a sadness she recognized. A sadness she carried too. For a while, they just stood there, the night wind brushing across their faces like gentle fingertips. Then Mia finally checked her phone again. Her heart stopped when she saw the newest message. Call me urgently, music director Marco Reeves. Her eyes widened. This can't be real, she whispered. Richard chuckled. Marco Reeves doesn't waste his time. If he contacted you, he means it. She opened the message slowly, expecting it to be a mistake. But it wasn't. Marco Reeves had written, I want to speak to you about yesterday's performance. I believe you have rare emotional talent. Please call me. Mia covered her mouth. One small moment, one soft melody. And now the world's top music director wanted to talk to her. Richard nodded toward her phone. Call him. I can't, she said sharply. What if I sound stupid? What if he thinks I'm pretending? What if he thinks you're brilliant? Richard interrupted gently. Mia looked down, unable to answer. Richard sighed softly. All right, let's try something simpler. He walked toward the restaurant door and waved for someone inside. Moments later, the manager came out carrying the old wooden piano bench. Mia's eyebrows rose. Why are you bringing that? Richard tapped the seat lightly. Sit. Here? Outside? Yes, right here, he said. I want you to feel what it's like to play without eyes watching you, without fear. Without pressure. She hesitated, but something in his voice made her listen. She sat on the bench, the same bench she used inside, but now the quiet night wrapped around it like a blanket. Richard handed her his phone, the voice recorder already open. Play something small, something only you and the night can hear. Mia took a slow breath and closed her eyes. She placed her fingers gently on the thin air in front of her knees. Pretending the invisible keys were real, she began moving her fingers, recreating a small melody she used to play for her mother before bed. It was soft, gentle, warm, almost like a lullaby floating in the air. Even though there was no real piano, her hands moved with elegance, and to Richard, it was clear. A true musician didn't need an instrument to show emotion. When she finished, she opened her eyes slowly. It felt peaceful. That's your real self, Richard said. This is the Mia the world wants to hear. She looked at his phone, still recording, but no one heard anything. They don't need to. Richard replied, I just wanted you to hear yourself again. Something melted inside her chest, a small but powerful warmth she hadn't felt in years. Then Richard said the words that changed the direction of her life. Mia, tomorrow morning, I will take you to meet Marco Reeves. Her breath caught. Tomorrow? Yes, before the fear returns. Mia's heart pounded. She wasn't ready. But maybe she wasn't supposed to be ready. Maybe she only needed courage, not perfection. She nodded slowly. Okay. I'll try. Richard gave a proud smile. That's all you need to say. As they walked back inside to close the restaurant, Mia realized something important. Tonight wasn't the end of her fear, it was the beginning of her strength. The next morning arrived too quickly for Mia. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the restaurant, the audience, Richard's serious face, and the message from Marco Reeves. Her stomach twisted with nervous energy as she dressed in the simplest clothes she had. She didn't own anything fancy, nothing that looked like music talent, nothing that belonged on a stage. When she stepped outside her small apartment, she found Richard already waiting in his sleek black car. He stood outside, leaning against the door, looking calm and confident, almost as if he had expected her anxiety. You ready? He asked. No, Mia admitted honestly. Perfect, Richard replied with a smile. People who think they're ready are usually lying. Let's go. She sat inside the car, her fingers nervously twisting together. Richard didn't push her to talk. Instead, he let the quiet morning and soft city sounds fill the space while they drove. They reached the City Music Academy, a tall building made of glass and steel. It looked expensive, serious, and far too important for someone like Mia. She stopped walking as soon as she saw it. I can't go in there, she whispered. Yes, you can, Richard replied, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to be honest. They entered through the glass doors, and Mia felt her heart pounding in her ears. The lobby was grand, shining floors, walls covered with photos of famous musicians, trophies displayed in glass cases. Even the air smelled expensive. A receptionist looked at them with professional calm. "Mr. Hawley, welcome. Mr. Reeves is expecting you." "Expecting me?" Mia whispered, shocked that her name had become a reason for someone this important to wait. They walked down a long hallway. Mia's steps getting slower and smaller. Richard noticed and whispered, "Breathe, I'm right behind you," when they entered Marco Reeves's studio. Mia stopped completely. There he was, Marco Reeves, one of the most respected music directors in the country. He had silver hair tied in a loose ponytail, sharp eyes that looked like they saw everything, and a calm, thoughtful smile. He stood when he saw Mia. "It's good to finally meet the girl who made millions of hearts stop last night." Millions. The word hit her like a shock. Millions? She whispered. Richard nodded. "Your video reached over 2 million views overnight." Her knees wobbled. She grabbed a nearby chair to keep herself steady. This was too much, too fast. Marco walked toward her slowly, as if not to scare her. "Do you know why your video went viral?" he asked. Mia shook her head. "Because you played like someone who felt every note deeply. People don't want perfect music. They want honest music." Mia swallowed hard. I just played what I remembered." Marco nodded. "Exactly. That's what makes you special." He led her to a grand piano at the center of the studio. It was shiny black, huge, and intimidating. It looked nothing like the dusty, broken piano from the restaurant. "Sit," Marco said softly. "Let's hear you." Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She sat down slowly, touching the smooth keys gently, almost too gently, like she was afraid they might break. Richard stood behind her. Silent support in human form. Marco watched her with patience. "Play anything. It doesn't have to be perfect." Mia's hands shook. She pressed one key. It sounded too clean, too rich, too powerful for someone like her. She hesitated, her breath quick and shallow. "Close your eyes," Marco said quietly. "Don't look at the piano. Look at your memories." Mia closed her eyes, and something shifted in her heart. Her fear loosened just a little. She imagined her mother sitting beside her. She imagined the restaurant's dusty piano. She imagined the warm applause, the kind faces, the encouragement Richard gave her, and then her fingers began to move, slowly at first, uncertain, then smoother, deeper, more emotional. The melody that came out wasn't the same as last night. It wasn't the old lullaby. It was something new, soft, sad, hopeful, a mixture of everything she felt inside. Marco leaned forward slightly, studying each movement of her fingers. Richard watched the expression on his face, trying to understand what he saw. When Mia reached the final note, she opened her eyes slowly, afraid of what they would say. Marco didn't speak at first. He simply stared at her as if analyzing every second of her performance. Then he smiled. "You're rare," he said. "Rare in a way that can't be taught." Mia blinked, tears rising in her eyes. She didn't know how to respond to such powerful words. Marco continued. "I want to offer you a chance to perform at an upcoming showcase. It's small, but important. A place where real talent is discovered." Mia felt her breath disappear. "Me? Perform?" "Yes," Marco affirmed. "You have a message hidden in your music, and the world needs to hear it." Richard smiled proudly. "See? I told you." Mia didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart was full. Her hands shook, and tears finally fell down her cheeks. For the first time in years, life wasn't closing doors on her. It was opening them, one after another, and now, a new stage stood waiting, a place where she might finally belong. Mia sat on the piano bench in Marco Reeves's studio, her heart still beating too fast from the moment he offered her the showcase. She couldn't believe it. A chance to perform on a real stage, in front of real musicians, real judges, and a real audience. She stared at Marco, then at Richard, as if waiting for someone to say it was a joke. But both men watched her with soft but serious expressions. They believed in her more than she believed in herself. Mia finally whispered, "I don't know if I can do it." Marco crossed his arms gently. "Fear is normal. What matters is what you do next," Richard added in a calm voice. "You're not alone. I'll help you. Marco will guide you. We're here. those words wrapped around her like a warm blanket. But the fear inside her still pressed hard. She stood up from the piano and paced slowly around the room, staring at the floor. What if I forget the notes? What if my hands shake? What if people laugh? What if I fail? Marco stepped forward. Mia, true music doesn't come from perfect hands. It comes from an honest heart. He placed one hand gently over hers. You already have what many trained musicians don't: emotion, she swallowed, feeling tears pushing against her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever cared this much about her talent. The kindness felt overwhelming, almost unbelievable. Let's start slowly, Marco suggested. I'll play a simple pattern. And you follow. He sat beside her and played a soft sequence. Mia watched carefully, then placed her fingers over the keys and copied it. Her hands trembled, but the melody came through gentle. Sweet, with her natural softness, Marco nodded. Good. Again. She repeated it, smoother this time. Again. She repeated it once more, stronger for the next hour. They practiced small melodies, little exercises, emotional pieces from Marco's old lessons. By the end of the session, Mia's hands weren't shaking as much. Her breathing steadied, her confidence grew bit by bit. Richard watched everything from the corner of the room, smiling every time she made progress. Proud like a mentor who knew she was more powerful than she realized. But when the session ended, reality hit Mia again. The showcase was only 3 nights away. She felt her stomach tighten. Outside the academy, the air was cold, but the sun was shining softly. Mia hugged her arms around herself while Richard walked beside her. You did well, he said. I made mistakes, she replied. And you corrected them, he answered. That's what matters. As they reached the car, her phone buzzed again. She expected another viral video notification, but it wasn't that. It was a message from her landlord, rent due soon. Please respond. Her heart sank. She had forgotten about rent completely. She didn't even know if she could afford it this month. The panic she had felt for years returned sharply. Richard noticed the change in her expression. What's wrong? She tried to hide it. Nothing. It's fine, Mia, he said gently. Don't push people away when you need help. She looked down, embarrassed. I don't want to be a burden. Richard shook his head. You are not a burden. And you are allowed to accept support. But Mia still felt torn. She had spent so long surviving on her own that depending on someone felt wrong. That evening, she returned home exhausted. Her tiny apartment felt even smaller than before. She placed her hands on the piano keys she didn't have. Imagining them again, she practiced in the air, letting her fingers dance silently through the darkness. She wanted to be ready. She wanted to honor her mother's memory. She wanted to show Marco he wasn't wrong for believing in her. But the fear kept whispering in the back of her mind. Before she went to sleep, she opened her phone one last time. She hadn't checked the viral video all day. Her breath caught when she saw the updated number, 6.4 million views. Her heart pounded. Millions of people had seen her hands, her face, her pain, her talent. She dropped onto the bed, overwhelmed. Burying her face in her pillow. Why me? She whispered into the quiet room. The next day, she returned to the academy again, this time. She found Marco waiting with sheet music. I wrote something for you, he said. Something simple, something emotional. Something that suits your style. The piece was beautiful, soft, delicate, deep. Mia played it slowly, her heart filling with emotion with each note. Marco nodded. This will be your showcase performance, she blinked. Mine? Yes, he replied, because only you can play it the way it needs to be played. As she practiced, Richard walked in quietly and listened. A small smile formed on his lips when Mia finished. Marco and Richard exchanged a look, one filled with quiet certainty. She's ready, Marco said. No, Mia whispered softly to herself. Her heart racing again. I'm scared, but this time. Instead of running from fear, she placed her hand over her chest. And she whispered something she never thought she would say. I'll do it anyway. The night of the showcase arrived faster than Mia expected. The city lights glittered like stars, scattered on the streets. Cars moved slowly. And people in elegant clothes filled the entrance of the performance hall. It looked like another world, one she never believed she would be a part of. Mia stood backstage, her hands cold, her heart beating so loudly she could hear it against her ribs. The long curtains blocked her view of the audience, but she could still hear the soft buzz of excited voices, the shifting chairs, the quiet whispers. She wore a simple dress Marco found for her, not expensive, not dramatic, just soft and elegant. The kind her mother would have loved. Richard stood beside her, adjusting the sleeves of his suit with a gentle smile. Breathe, he whispered. I can't, Mia replied honestly. Trembling, yes you can, he insisted. You've already faced bigger fears than this. Marco joined them, holding a small stack of sheet music in his hand. Mia, he said quietly, tonight is not about perfection. It's about honesty. Play from your heart. And people will feel you. She nodded, her throat tight. What if I make a mistake? Marco smiled. Then you keep playing. The audience will forgive mistakes. But they won't forgive empty music. The host walked toward them and announced, You're next. Mia felt her entire world tilt. Marco placed his hand on her shoulder. This is your moment, Richard added softly. And we're right here. The curtains parted, and the bright lights hit her eyes. She stepped onto the stage slowly, her legs weak and unsure. The hall was bigger than she imagined, hundreds of faces. Shining lights, cameras ready. A sea of strangers waiting for her to begin. She felt as if the world had gone silent. The only sound was her own heartbeat, pounding like a drum. Mia sat at the grand piano at center stage. Her hands hovered above the polished keys. Cold and shaky, she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and whispered softly to herself, For you, Mom. And then she began to play. The first notes were soft and slow, almost unsure, but as the melody moved, her fingers relaxed, her heart opened, and the music flowed with pure emotion. The hall grew silent, every person leaning forward, captured by the vulnerability in her sound. Her music wasn't strong like a trained professional. It wasn't perfect or loud or complicated, but it was honest, deep, filled with a quiet pain and gentle hope that touched people more strongly than any flawless performance could. Marco watched from backstage with a smile that reached his eyes. Richard stood beside him, his chest swelling with pride. The melody rose, then softened, twisting with emotion, telling the story of a girl who once lost her dreams and was now finding her way back. A woman in the audience wiped her tears. A young boy leaned his head against his mother's shoulder. A couple held hands tighter. Every heart in the room felt something. As the final note echoed softly into the high ceiling, Mia let her fingers rest on the keys. Her eyes remained closed. She was afraid to look up, afraid to face the world again. But when she finally lifted her head, the hall exploded with applause, a loud, overwhelming, powerful applause that washed over her like a wave. People stood from their seats, a standing ovation. Just for her, Mia covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had never felt this much love from strangers. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't forgotten. She wasn't the quiet girl who hid her talent. She was Mia, a pianist, a performer, a girl who survived her past and walked bravely into her future. Richard stepped onto the stage, not caring about the cameras or the bright lights. He walked straight to her and pulled her into a gentle hug. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Marco joined them, smiling warmly. "Tonight, you became who you were always meant to be," Mia sobbed softly. Overwhelmed, but this time, they were tears of joy, not pain. She looked at the audience again, clapping, recording, smiling, and she felt something powerful inside her. She felt belonging. Later that night, as she stepped outside into the cool air, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "I did it, Mom." And for the first time since her mother's passing, the world felt bright again, not because she went viral, not because people applauded, but because she finally believed in herself. Her life had changed forever, and this time, she was ready to walk forward strong, brave, and full of music.